You can find ways to hack the system, and recording voice notes is something I love telling my clients to do, because sometimes too, when we sit down and we think we're sitting down to write, the ideas are like, oh, cool, we're not coming to you right now. And so I don't know about you, but I get a lot of my best ideas when I'm out for a walk or something. So actually capturing them in that way is great, because then it's like you've got, as you say, a starting point.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5. And I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Welcome to episode 15 of the Design Dialogues podcast. This week I am talking with copywriter Emma McMillan. Before we get to the dialogue though, I wanted to tell you a little about what has been happening at More Time to Design. We have just released some new features, more advanced schedule tools, increased capability with our supplier list, and more connectivity across the platform. We are in the last 3 months of 2023. Have you seen the Christmas stuff in the stores? It's crazy. And now is the time to make sure your systems and processes are in place and your business is running as well as it can be for 2024. Make sure to sign up for a product demonstration so we can show you how More Time to Design can help you build a better business. I will pop the link into the show notes so you can book an appointment. Also, if you are enjoying the podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. Reviews are one of the best ways for people to find the podcast. If you are unsure how to leave a review, I will put in the show notes some simple instructions to follow. I really do appreciate you taking the time to leave a review. This week on the podcast, we are meeting Emma McMillan from Not Just About Copy. I first heard Emma talk when she was a guest inside a business coaching session I was doing. I loved the way she spoke about copy, and for someone who finds the thought of having to write something as pretty terrifying, Emma definitely made me feel comfortable about writing. I hope you enjoyed this week's Design Dialogue. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. And today I am joined by Emma McMillan. Hi Emma.
Hi Beth.
Thank you so much for joining me. So I love to find out, to start with, what can you see out your window today?
I can see some trees and the fence and the next door neighbour's huge garage that they built during COVID, which has blocked a fair bit of my sunlight, disappointingly. But I'm just admiring my handiwork on the pruning that I did actually a few weeks ago. So
Nice. So kind of a nice outlook.
It is, and it's my own little office. You know, no one comes in here. There's nothing interesting to anyone else. So yeah, I'm happy with it.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit about your business, because you are a copywriter. And as an interior designer, I know that words do not come easily to me. So tell me a little bit about your business and how you started it and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. And firstly, just to say that if you were to see the interiors of my home, you would understand that everybody has their skills.
Yes, we're all good at something.
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey. Initially, before I started my business, I was a secondary school teacher. So I did that for quite a long time, and then started my business in 2016. So I had a baby and a business baby in the same year.
Yeah.
And it's really evolved a lot since then. So initially I was working purely as a copywriter. I started off with a lot of education clients, and then that broadened out to lots of different industries. I was a real generalist for a while, which was great because I sort of got to do, health and lifestyle and this and that. At one stage, I was writing some interiors copy as well.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting because I just sort of learned about all these different industries, and I found that fascinating. But eventually I niched down into more website copywriting because I felt like those are the kinds of projects that I really enjoyed, like getting into with clients and helping them to create, I guess, that beautiful visual informative presence. It's almost like the business card for their business.
Yeah.
About a couple of years ago, probably during COVID, really, I started to really miss I suppose the teaching part of what I used to do. And so for me, the last few years have been evolving my business again into one that's more about copywriting coaching and training and supporting small business owners in whatever industry they're in to actually write better for their business. Because the reality is that, that budget-wise and resource-wise, etc., we can't always outsource the copy that we need for our business.
Yeah.
And even if we could, I don't necessarily think that that's the best thing to do as the voice and the face of our business. I think people, once they can start to take ownership of what their messages are, what their tone of voice is, then they just can feel so much more confident about creating that day-to-day content. So, those emails, the social stuff, the website updates, all the things that we need without having to kind of go into panic mode or think, oh, I've got to get someone else to do that.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now. And I'm loving it because I feel like I get to see those aha moments and build that capacity in others.
Yeah.
But bring together those different skill sets that I have. So I run a membership, content writing membership for small business owners to keep them accountable and also sort of provide that education and that sort of hand-holding guidance. And then I work one-on-one with people who kind of want to really sort of dig deep into what their messaging is, what their tone of voice is, and get that support as they sort of build their writing skills over a period of time. So
wow. That's awesome. I find writing really hard. Like I don't enjoy it. I don't think I'm very good at it. Like I find it really, really hard. So I find this whole thing very fascinating. Is writing a little bit like anything, and you actually just need to do it to get better at it?
It depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I would say yes. I think that I have a bit of a catchphrase I like to use, and it's everyone can write better, including you. And it's true, because it honestly is one of those things that the more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you do it, and especially if you're in a space where you can get some feedback on what's working and what's not. Like we're not so great when we're just sort of spiraling, ourselves thinking like, oh, this doesn't sound how I want it to sound, etc. But if you've got, a business buddy or, someone who you can actually share something with and get feedback, then the more you do, the better you'll get.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like you just kind of got to start before you're ready and make it really low stakes to start with. I tell my clients, like, just write your to-do list and then just write whatever, but don't necessarily write for the purposes of publishing. If it's something that you need to build your confidence in, just start to write more as just a habit, because sometimes when we think about we're writing to share, that layers it with all these other feelings, whereas we just want to write to start to practice, to get in the habit, which eventually will lead to something.
Yeah. I must admit, one thing that I have started doing recently, and I can't remember who told me to do this, but I do find it very helpful, is to actually record, say what I want to write, and then kind of have that, dictated. And at least then I've got a starting point, because half the time I'm like, oh, I don't even know where to start. And I'm like, oh, like blank paper syndrome. I'm like, oh. So I have found that very helpful. So it really is a bit like a muscle. Like you just need to do it and kind of work on it.
You do, but like you've just said before, you can find ways to hack the system, and recording voice notes is something I love telling my clients to do, because sometimes too, when we sit down and we think we're sitting down to write, the ideas are like, oh, cool, we're not coming to you right now. And so I don't know about you, but I get a lot of my best ideas when I'm out for a walk or something. So actually capturing them in that way is great, because then it's like you've got, as you say, a starting point. Another similar kind of tool that I like to share with people to kind of hack their own writing is to actually be in conversation with someone else. To have someone else ask you questions, like, for instance, Beth, tell me about why you started your business. And actually in the form of a conversation, you can often draw the information out. So you could just sit with anybody and record that conversation. And again, that's somewhere to start.
That's awesome. I just realized I most probably got that tip from listening to your own podcast. That's most probably where I got it from. So thank you.
My pleasure. Anytime.
One of the things that I definitely struggle with is that concept of making translating how I talk, how I am, into the written word, like really getting the voice matching the copy. So often it sounds so formal, or it's not formal enough. And it's like, and I think the rules around this have changed a little bit. Like, I think in general, we're becoming a lot more informal in the way we write and communicate. How do you talk to people about developing that voice in their copy?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you've made too, that there definitely has been a big shift. And I'm even seeing it start to happen in corporate as well, though it's a bit slower in that sort of sphere, but definitely in the small business space. And I think it's really important to make that distinction between formal and professional. Like, you can still be professional without being like old school formal. So I think that's really important for people to understand. One of the things that I love to do is to get people to actually create what's called, it's not a sexy name, but I call it a word bank. And essentially it's something that a copywriter would do as part of a bigger tone of voice project. But essentially it's almost like creating a little bit of a bank of words and phrases and things that you can come back to in your business, because you've probably already got a tone of voice that you've kind of developed just through naturally kind of sharing over time. But what people can sometimes find is that perhaps they've either gone a little bit too generic and general, trying to kind of, appeal to lots of people. So it maybe is a little bit vanilla sounding. Or that, that they've actually got a whole lot of things that they say. And if they actually start to go through like their website, through their socials and so on, they'll start to find like, oh, I always say these words. I always say this. So I always end like that. And they can start to become like just the little kind of anchor points for you. And so what I'd really encourage people to do is to actually start to look through, have they got, phrases and words and things that they could say, yes, these are the things that I love to say and use. And similarly, what they don't like the sound of. Like, I'm not like a girl boss person, or like, I can very easily say, like, this is not in my tone of voice either. And if you can start to actually use some descriptive words around, like, how would you describe your tone of voice to someone? And I know we'll probably touch on this later with Chat GPT, but what you can do as a starting point, if you really think, I don't know how to describe my tone of voice, is to actually grab a section of your writing, pop it into Chat GPT and say, can you describe the tone of voice of this writing? Oh, wow. And it will give you some words. So, for example, if I put some of my copy in there and say, tell me what tone of voice this is, it'll say things like warm, approachable, encouraging, and so on. And I can go, yeah, that really, feels right to me, that resonates. And then I can then prompt it in future with those same sorts of words. Can you write it in the style of so that we're kind of on the same page. But that's some of the tips that I would give around, looking at tone of voice, but very much just feeling into who you are. And not being afraid to share some of yourself through your writing as well. I think that's really definitely something that I've struggled with. Like, it's that
and you're right, like it's that formality and professionalism are quite different things. And it's how do you get that tone right, and how do you come across so that it does all kind of marry up, and like, you know, especially for for most people, but for interior designers who work in such a visual medium, how do you make sure that's all kind of coming together and it is very succinct in the way the messaging is coming across? So I think that's really awesome, those tips, I think. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned you did some website, you used to kind of concentrate on website copy. So one thing that I know a lot of interior designers do, and builders I think are very, very guilty of this, is they'll have this beautiful website and they'll just have images, lots of images and no words. And most probably they might fall into the same category as me, as they're like, words are not my thing. But from an SEO perspective, that is not ideal. What are some of the, like, what would you say to someone who's like, knows they've got to put more text onto their, or more copy onto their website, but really doesn't know where to start? What would be some of the things you would encourage them to start looking at as maybe the first couple of things they could do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something I see a lot. And even photographers and all sorts of visual sorts of brands. And why wouldn't you showcase the thing that you can do, right? But yes, as you say, it's not a great tactic when it comes to SEO, because search engines are looking to find, you know, where's the valuable information on this topic. And if it can't actually crawl, you know, your site to find it in the text. I mean, one thing that I would suggest straight away is to start to develop some FAQ. And the good thing about FAQ is you can style them on your site so they can be kind of that drop-down concertina sort of look. So it doesn't have to mess too much with the aesthetic of your site. But essentially, that could be a really great place to capture some of the inquiries and queries that people, you know, ask you all the time. And we've all got those sort of questions that we could reel off that people ask us all the time about our process, or what do I need to, you know, do or know before I talk to you, or how long do things take, and all that sort of stuff. So I think everybody could come up with a selection of frequently asked questions and answers and style them into that concertina. And a style as a starting point. And again, Chat GPT, if you're stuck for FAQ ideas, just give it the topic and ask for some prompts. And then you come up with the answers. So that's a really great way. But I always just keep a running list of what people ask me in my business as well, because not just for FAQ, but for any kind of content ideas. A lot of my podcast episodes have been based on questions people have asked me, and I've thought, well, rather than just answer this one person, I'm going to answer it in a public space and actually create some content around this. So we've got so many opportunities to create content based on what people already want to know from us. So I think that's really important, and to think of our websites not just as our kind of showpieces, but to think of them as like where often people are having a first interaction and touch point with us. And so it's really important for people to feel welcomed onto a site, for them to understand where they need to go next. So thinking about like, what's that user journey through that site? So for instance, I personally wouldn't want to work with someone, especially in the context of interior design, if I couldn't read a bit about them and how they worked in their process. Right. And so let's say I'm researching different interior designers. I would be curious to see, like, how does Beth's process vary from this other person's process, or what kinds of projects do they specialize in, so I can assess which one is the best fit for me, or why did they start their business? Is there something that I can relate to on a personal level? Like, so actually sharing a little bit about the background and the process, I think, is super valuable. And that's really a way for you to differentiate yourself, isn't it? Because if you run your business, you are the differentiator.
Absolutely.
And it's your experience, your expertise, and the way you do things, your approach, that is what makes you you. And so if you don't explain what that is, then how are people going to know, and how are people going to find that in point with you? That's really interesting. I think as well, like when it comes to websites, I think
people sometimes get so kind of like, oh, I've got to have this and I've got to have that kind of thing. I think sometimes the more simple websites done really well are the ones that are most successful in terms of SEO and also kind of conversion to, of clients. I was recently talking to a good friend of mine who's about to start up. She's starting her own business as a nutritionist. A dietitian, very different from what I do. But it was really interesting talking to her about what she needed on her website and what she needed to communicate. And I was saying, you don't need to. She was kind of like, I don't think I'll do a website because it just feels so overwhelming. And I'm like, these days you can make them so simply. But with the right copy, they can really, really help your business grow if you get that SEO right. So it's a really interesting, I think, part of website design that people most probably usually comes as a bit of an afterthought, I think. So, and do you find that the copy comes as an afterthought?
It really depends. Like, I used to find there were almost two different types of clients. Ones who would come and say, right, I want to get a website done. I need the copy first. And others would be like, right, I've got the design, I've got the this, I've got the, and now I need the words. And it's kind of like, you really need all those things at the same time. Yeah. So the best kind of, arrangement was always when there was this like synergy, I suppose, between the words, the design, etc., because everything really feeds into everything else. And logistically, that can make it a bit tricky to kind of juggle those things at the same time. But it's a reason why copywriters and designers and branding people often collaborate together, because that's just how the best kinds of projects come to life. And in fact, I partner a lot with a website designer, and she will often send clients to me who want copy coaching for their website. So they don't want to outsource it, but they want some support to actually write the copy for their site. And so I can support them with that. And she really uses a lot of the conversations that we have in terms of the briefing in her, like to influence her design as well. So there's a real crossover between those things. So
so I was recently asked to send across a bio for something that I was talking at, and it was like short notice, and I was like, oh, this is not good. I should have this done and I don't. I'm going to ask you this question in two parts, because the first thing about it is, like, if you are putting together a bio, what are like the top 3 tips that you need to include? But the other thing that I would love to know is, how do you work in coaching someone like me, who I was like, oh, I just need to get someone else to write this because I can't do it. How does that kind of coaching and I suppose the membership, how does that work in reality and kind of the practical sense kind of thing, to kind of get to the point where you do feel confident, I've got this, I can just get it out kind of thing? Because I think in small business, so often things happen so quickly, and you got to be able to like jump at the chance, and you've got to like, go, yep, I can do that. And you got to turn things around quickly, or you need to make a quick change on the website, and you don't want to outsource it because that costs money. Like, you just want to do it quickly. So how does that's a really big question. It's meandering, I know, but like, how does that all kind of work? And
such good questions. And just know, for starters, that you're not alone with that. Nobody finds it easy to write about themselves. And so the first thing I'll say to that is that whenever I'm creating something, I never think to myself, I'm creating the finished version of this. Like, whether it's a bio, a website, whatever, everything is just like for now. Right. And done is better than perfect.
Yes.
And so what I would say is, like, even with a bio, I've got probably like 10 versions in a doc that I have, because depending on the context, it will vary slightly. So I think sometimes we can make it difficult for ourselves, because we think like, I need a bio. How is it going to encompass like all the things that I want to say? Well, how about you don't have one version? How about you have a version that's for podcasts, a version that's for this, a version that's for that, so that you can actually tailor them so they seem more appropriate and valuable in the context that they're in, but you're not trying to say everything when it might not even feel relevant. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Because like, oh, like I got to put this and I got to put that. And I'm like, well, that's not, no, that was me. That was me about 3 weeks ago. I was like,
Yeah. So how can you know, like I wouldn't have the same bio for a speaking gig that was going in some sort of professional directory. Do you know what I mean? They're just not the same.
Yeah.
And a different bio if I was going to be saying it. And then I've got my like first person version. So I am. And then my third person version, which is Emma McMillan is. So just I would have a document and I would literally have a bunch of them on the go. Just tweak it each time for the appropriate, but don't delete it. Just add it below, right? But as your business evolves, as your services evolve, as you evolve, that bio should evolve. It's changed heaps, because if I was to say now, the things that I said about myself even a couple of years ago, that wouldn't ring true anymore. So I'm always just testing and iterating it.
Yeah. And I suppose that would apply to a lot of copy that you go through, like a constant kind of auditing it and updating it and making sure it might be relevant, because you say like what was relevant 2 years ago won't be relevant now, or it might be, kind of thing. Or so I suppose being aware of that as well through all of your copy in your business, going constantly kind of just checking it and making sure that it's fresh is a really important thing to do as well.
It is, but I also think it needs to not act as like oh God, well, if I can't just do it and tick it off and it's done, like, like what's, that's not what I wanted. Well, actually, if you think of it as like a freeing kind of idea, whereas like it doesn't have to be set in stone, it will evolve, but it's going to take you very little time to just tweak something rather than start something from scratch. So the bulk of the work will be done, but you'll just update little bits, and you'll want to, because you'll tweak your messaging, you'll have a new kind of arm to your business or something, and you'll want to share that update. And so I think if we can think of it as a freeing idea and like it takes the pressure off us rather than like it's just another thing. Yeah,
I might think like that a little bit. So we touched on this briefly, but I think, AI and all this kind of stuff is really it's in our awareness now more than, even in the last 12 months. I just feel like we talk about it all the time, where before we didn't. And Chat GPT, is it friend or is it foe?
I think it's both. I think it depends on what you use it for. And what I love to use it for, and what I tell my clients to use it for, or what I encourage them to, is like a bit of a brainstorming buddy. It's kind of like having someone across from you where you can, just bounce ideas around, or like a starting point, so that, you mentioned before, you don't want to look at the blank page. Well, Chat GPT is like a little bit of a vehicle for you so that you don't have to sit and look at a blank page. So I'll take a step back for a second and say, that's the way that I would use it. I don't ever use it to, write full pieces of stuff. I just don't think that's going to serve my purpose. And I think any copy that comes out of it needs a human eye and a good human edit.
Yeah.
But it's all about how you prompt it as well. So, for example, if you were to say, like, I'll use the example we talked about before with the FAQ, like you would say to ChatGPT, imagine you are an interior designer. You work predominantly with small businesses and you specialize in like home renovations or whatever it is. Can you write 10 frequently asked question topics for me?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, can I have 10 frequently asked question topics with no context?
Yeah.
What I would encourage you and your listeners to do is to get really specific in terms of how you prompt ChatGPT, so it actually can give you something that feels, relevant. Or what would be 5 topics I could talk about in my newsletter, with those same parameters. Or what are some topics that are, current in the industry? For those just kind of thought starters, just to kind of get some ideas bubbling, I think it's super useful.
Yeah. And I suppose it's a tool that I think we should all embrace. But you're right, you kind of you can't outsource to it completely. Like it's a starting point. It's not a finishing spot, I suppose.
Yeah, but you can have a bit of fun with it too. Like I have got it to help me with things like naming, like, can you suggest some names for my program? Like this is what it's about, yada, yada. And sometimes it lets you know exactly what you don't want.
Yeah.
It gives you an idea and you're like, oh God, the exact opposite to that. But it can be useful also for things like headlines or like subject lines for an email. Like you just paste in the copy of the email and say, can you suggest 10 subject lines for this? And again, 8 of them will be rubbish. 2 of them will be like, oh, okay, there's something I could work with there. So have fun with it. I get my son to sit with me and we write a story about it, and he tells me all the characters he wants in it, and like they play basketball and they win their grand final, and it just spits out a great story. So
love that.
Have fun with it too. Use it in the kitchen. I've got friends who use it to cook by telling it what's in the fridge, and it comes up with a recipe based on what you have in your fridge. So
wow, I'll need to give that a try. That's very good. So this is something that I, bit meandering off, but it's about kind of business in general. And I'd love to know, so you've recently launched a membership model for your business. And you also sent out like an email, your weekly email, which I thought was really interesting because it touched on how challenging small business is at the moment. And, like you, I talk to lots of small businesses every day, and there's definitely a bit of a mood shift. Like there's an uncertainty in the air. But I do also think everyone is trying to stay positive, but sometimes that can be hard. And I love that you've kind of, I suppose, pivoted a little bit in releasing this membership and changing your business model to accommodate this membership. And it's really kind of like, I think, interesting that people are now moving to these kind of business models a little bit more. How does the membership work, and how do people, what do people get out of the membership?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think where it initially came from, well, there was a couple of reasons. One was that after people had worked with me, either in a one-on-one capacity or a program capacity, there was really nowhere else for them to go in my business. And I was really conscious that, I wanted to work with those people. They wanted something else, and there kind of wasn't anything there. So I wanted to make something, but also connection is a huge value for me in my business. Not only connections between me and the clients I work with and collaborate with, but also bringing people together is something that I want to do. And so for me, it was about creating a space where, yes, I could be the expert guide and facilitator, but there's so much like energy and like talent in the room with me, where there's people who have all different kinds of businesses, from, web designers to app designers to branding people to psychologists to, all sorts of people. And what we do is we come together once a week, and 2 of those sessions each month are co-writing sessions where people just literally set an intention for what they're going to work on, and not just like co-working where you can sort of be doing any kind of work. This is a focused writing time. So it might be like, I'm going to finish my bio because I need to send it off, by the end of the day, that kind of thing you were talking about. So we have those co-writing sessions, but then we also have space in the month for a Q&A session where people can come and bring their copy and content questions. And then another session where it's copy hot seat. So it's an opportunity for people to get feedback on what they're working on, and feedback from me as the copy expert, but also feedback from the others in the space about, what lands, what doesn't, what makes sense, what else would you need to know about this? And because there's people coming from these different industries and backgrounds, there's all these different perspectives, and it's so interesting and useful. So we have that space. And then there's also a membership hub where I keep resources, and so people can look at those in their own time to help support them with, specific things, like whether it be auditing their own website, or whether it be strategies for dealing with a blank page, or whatever it is. There's the activity, things like that. So there's the resources, and then the weekly kind of sessions where we come together. And it's been as much about the community as it has about the learning.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I think so often when things are quiet, people you kind of have 2 kind of options. You can kind of crawl under a rock, or you can kind of go, okay, I'm going to take the time to learn and work on the parts of my business that I normally don't have the time to, or, it's been on the to-do list. And I think copy would fall into that category so often. So I really love this, because I think so often to hire a copywriter is expensive. And so I think something like this is so, it makes it very accessible to people, which I think is really great. What kind of copy are people working on in the membership? Is it all sorts, or are they, is there a trend, or?
Yeah, it's funny. There sort of seems to be like almost thematic trends without necessarily imposing that on people. But last month, a lot of people were working on emails. So whether that be their weekly email that they send out, or their fortnightly, or their semi-regular, whatever their frequency is, or it might have been creating a welcome email sequence. Like, I've got a brand designer in there who said to me, I've been in business for nearly 10 years and I've never, ever given any thought to onboarding people. And I've finally written, a welcome sequence because of this time slot. It's just, it's actually getting people to think about, what are those things that you've been meaning to create, but you just haven't done, or creating new pages for their website, like to actually, advertise new service offerings, or to, what are other things? Case studies people have been doing, or sales pages, like all sorts of things. Some social media, but I'm always very conscious to make sure that social media for people is part of a bigger content strategy, and not just to use that time just to kind of, post sort of aimlessly.
Yeah. It's one of many things, not
one of many things. No,
I think that sounds really, I think it sounds like a really lovely space that you are creating. I can imagine it's a very supportive environment that you're creating in that virtual room. So I think that's lovely. And I suppose this kind of answers this question a little bit, but what are you looking forward to for the next 12 months in your business?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing to support more of the kinds of clients that I already do support through the membership and through one-to-one. I've been working with a couple of slightly bigger businesses recently too, to go in and offer workplace training and coaching, like helping support teams to actually feel more confident writing in the workplace as well. So that's been a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But the membership and my one-on-one is really where my heart is at the moment, and just helping those small business owners to feel like they can actually put their stuff out with confidence, and not to overthink it so much, and just to have a bit of fun with it, but from that purposeful place.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how can our community reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, so all the stuff is at emmamcmillancopy.com. So there's some free resources there. There's a link to my podcast page. The podcast is not just about copy. That comes out fortnightly, but it used to come out weekly. So there's 80 plus episodes that people can catch up on.
I can highly recommend that.
Oh, thanks, Beth. It's good for copywriting tips, but also just general small business stuff, and lots of chats with small business people. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, but the website is kind of where everything has a home base.
Yeah, perfect. And we will link to all of that in the show notes. Emma, thank you so much for this chat. I've loved it. And you've inspired me a little bit to kind of maybe do a bit more copy. So
mission accomplished. Thanks for having me, Beth. It's been great.
Thanks, Emma.
What a great chat with Emma. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did chatting to Emma. A couple of things that I took out from it was the way Emma talked about how to prompt Chat GPT to get the most out of it. I think so often, and I am guilty of this, I kind of just put in something to Chat GPT and it kind of spits out something that's okay, but I definitely think learning how to prompt it, how to give it some context around what you want it to produce, and also what kind of tone to use, I think is so helpful. The other thing that I really loved from what Emma talked about was not having just one go at something and not thinking that the first thing you do or the one version of it is that it's done. I think so often when writing is not something that you love doing, like myself, that sometimes you just want to get it done. But I really loved that advice of having it as an evolving thing, having different versions of it for different things, and not trying to have one document to do all the things. So I hope you really loved this episode of the Design Dialogues podcast and you found it helpful, and that there are things that you can take away from it to put into action to your own business. See you next week, guys, for our next Design Dialogue. Thank you for listening to this Design Dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next Design Dialogue.